My brother stole my inheritance while I covered all our parents' expenses, so I exposed him publicly and took back everything he tried to claim. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I've always tried to support my younger brother, Ryan, even when it hurt me professionally. I still remember the day he walked into the office, fresh out of college, eyes wide, eager, but completely clueless about the work we did. I tried to guide him at first, patiently showing him spreadsheets, client accounts, and deadlines, things I could handle blindfolded, things that had become second nature after years of late nights. Our parents always praised him for his creativity and unique vision, even when he messed up basic tasks, and for some reason, that praise made me feel I had to fix everything behind the scenes. I stayed late nights, took on extra projects, and covered for his mistakes without a single complaint, juggling my workload while quietly footing parts of the company's expenses he conveniently ignored. Meanwhile, Ryan would walk out of the office chatting with coworkers, casually taking credit for the work I'd done, like it was some harmless quirk of his personality. At home, the pattern was the same. I'd hear him boast to friends about how supportive I was, making it seem like he was the one carrying the family while I silently paid the bills, covered late fees, and balanced our parents' expectations. Subtle red flags started popping up, small lies about money, excuses for missed deadlines, and that casual sense of entitlement that seemed to grow each year. I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal, that he was just young, that siblings sometimes borrow from each other without thinking. But deep down, a nagging unease began to settle in. I couldn't shake the feeling that my sacrifices were becoming invisible, that my trust and hard work were setting the stage for something I couldn't yet name. I'd worked tirelessly to keep everything afloat, believing that family meant protection, loyalty, and silent support. Little did I know, the imbalance between us wasn't just temporary, it was quietly tipping in a way that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my brother. And I had no idea how soon that moment of betrayal would arrive. I always thought being the responsible one meant I was doing the right thing, but over time, the weight of it all started to crush me. I was the one paying the mortgage, covering utilities, and footing the bills for family emergencies, again and again, while Ryan spent his paycheck on gadgets, nights out, and vacations he didn't tell me about. Our parents never said anything directly, but the way they spoke about him, how special and fragile he was, made it feel like my efforts were expected, invisible, a silent rule I had no choice but to follow. Every month, I'd log our expenses, transfer funds, pay bills I shouldn't have had to, and still be polite when Ryan complained he didn't have enough. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills, and muttering under my breath, "Why does he get to coast while I do everything?" It wasn't just financial. At work, I had to fix his errors, redo reports he claimed were his, and smooth things over with clients who thought he was the star of the project. Friends started noticing my exhaustion, giving me knowing looks when I tried to downplay it. "You're doing everything again, aren't you?" one of them asked, and I nodded, forcing a smile. Ryan, of course, had no idea what I was feeling, he was too busy bragging to coworkers about the help he got from me. It stung worse at home, though. The casual way he joked with our parents about my obsession with perfection made it feel like my sacrifices were a joke. I knew something was off, but I kept telling myself I was just being dramatic, that family always had imbalances. Still, a part of me started to wonder how long I could keep carrying everything while he coasted, completely oblivious. I didn't yet realize that my patience and trust were being quietly manipulated, and that this imbalance I was sustaining would soon explode in a way I never saw coming. I never thought much about inheritance growing up, I just assumed whatever came from our grandparents would be handled fairly. That all changed the day I overheard a conversation between Ryan and my parents about the estate. He had this sly smile, leaning against the kitchen counter, casually dropping lines like, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything," as if he already owned it. My stomach sank, but I didn't confront him immediately. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe he was joking. Deep down, though, a cold knot of worry began to form. I'd always trusted him, believed in fairness, and now the thought that he might manipulate the inheritance sent a quiet panic through me. It wasn't just the money, it was what it represented. This was my grandparents' hard work, something my parents wanted to see go to both of us, and I couldn't fathom the idea of Ryan trying to claim it all. Yet every time I asked him casually about paperwork, he brushed me off, saying, "Don't worry about it, bro. I've got this handled." The ease with which he dismissed me felt like a small dagger twisting in my chest. I tried to rationalize it, maybe he just wanted to be helpful, maybe I was overthinking, but the gnawing feeling in my gut didn't let up. I started noticing little things too, emails about the estate that didn't include me, phone calls he seemed to take in private, documents that I wasn't allowed to see. Our parents, unconsciously or not, encouraged his confidence, praising him for being proactive, while I felt sidelined. The more I tried to stay calm and trust him, the more uneasy I became, like standing on the edge of a cliff without realizing how thin the ground was beneath me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about inheritance, it was the first sign of a betrayal that could unravel everything I'd worked so hard for. I remember the exact moment it hit me, like a punch to the gut I never saw coming. I was going through some files for our parents, just routine paperwork, when I noticed a stack of documents filed under Ryan's name. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but the truth hit like a hammer. Ryan had secretly submitted paperwork claiming the full inheritance for himself. My hands shook as I stared at the forms, the room suddenly feeling unbearably small. I tried to call him, to ask for an explanation, and when he answered, his casual tone made my stomach twist. "Relax, bro," he said, laughing softly. "I just figured I'd take care of it before anyone else got confused." I felt my blood run cold. Everything I had done for him, every late night covering his mistakes, every dollar I'd spent keeping the family afloat, it suddenly felt like a setup for him to take everything from me. I confronted him in person that night, voice tight with anger. "How could you do this? You know it's supposed to be split fairly." He smirked, shrugging like it was nothing. "Fairly? I just made sure it didn't get messed up, man. You worry too much." It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. Seeing him smugly pocket what was rightfully mine while I'd labored for years, emotionally, financially, and professionally, was a sharp, burning realization that my trust had been abused. I felt my patience snap into frustration, anger, and disbelief all at once. And the worst part? I knew that this was only the beginning. If this was how far he'd go, I had no idea what else he might be willing to do behind my back. Even after discovering what Ryan had done, I kept covering for him. I told myself it was to prevent family chaos, to stop my parents from freaking out, and to avoid confrontation, but deep down, it was fear. Fear of rocking the boat, of showing how much I'd been used, of the fallout if the truth came out. Every month, I continued paying bills he conveniently forgot, fixing errors he'd made in the company, and balancing responsibilities that should have been shared. I remember sitting at my desk late one night, staring at my bank statements, realizing I'd given him more than I'd ever intended, and he didn't even notice. He acted like everything was normal, chatting with coworkers and friends as if he'd earned it all, while I silently carried the weight. The frustration started spilling into my personal life. I snapped at small things, felt drained, and couldn't sleep without going over numbers, payments, and deadlines in my head. One evening, I caught him red-handed, falsifying receipts to make it look like he had contributed more to the family expenses than he actually had. "Come on, it's just bookkeeping," he shrugged when I confronted him. "No one cares about numbers that much." The casual way he lied and manipulated the truth made my blood boil, but I still hesitated. Part of me clung to the hope that he'd eventually realize what he'd done. I started seeing the pattern clearly, my sacrifices, my dedication, my trust, all of it was being exploited. The gnawing feeling in my gut grew stronger every day, and I knew I couldn't keep ignoring it. Something had to give, and I started considering actions I'd never imagined before, plans that would expose him and reclaim everything he thought he could steal. But for now, I stayed silent, quietly plotting, aware that the tipping point was approaching. I couldn't believe what I found that night. I had been digging through old emails, bank statements, and shared documents just to make sense of how Ryan had managed to claim the inheritance without me noticing. And then it hit me, there it was, in black and white, clear, undeniable proof that he had manipulated the paperwork, forged signatures, and lied to everyone, including our parents. My hands shook as I scrolled through emails where he casually joked about taking care of it before bro realized, and receipts showing payments he claimed were his but were clearly covered by me. The sense of betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined, twisting in my chest like a knife. I felt both rage and a sick satisfaction. Finally, I had what I needed to fight back. The room felt smaller, heavier, as I sat there staring at the evidence. My mind raced with plans, moral dilemmas, and the fear of what would happen if I confronted him directly. Our parents had unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, supported him, praising his initiative, while I was left in the shadows. I realized the balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, I understood that patience and strategy might be my only way to win. I began drafting ideas: expose him publicly, use the evidence, make sure there was no way to wriggle out of accountability. My heart pounded at the thought of confrontation, but it was tempered with a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Justice was finally within reach. And yet, the fear lingered. Ryan had been cunning, charming, and manipulative for so long that I knew the fallout wouldn't be simple. This evidence was powerful, yes, but it also meant that every interaction from here on would be a minefield. I couldn't turn back now, not without losing everything I had built. The decision loomed over me like a storm, and I knew the moment to strike was coming. By this point, I was exhausted in every sense, physically, mentally, emotionally. I had poured years into keeping my life, my career, and my family afloat, only to realize how completely I'd been manipulated. Ryan was living like a king, enjoying the perks of my work while I was stuck in a cycle of exhaustion and quiet anger. The betrayal wasn't just about money anymore, it was about trust, loyalty, and the realization that someone I had loved and protected could turn so cold. I found myself sitting alone on the couch one night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was even worth it to fight back. For the first time, I felt completely powerless, like everything I had done had been erased by his greed and charm. Every attempt to bring it up to him ended in dismissal or mockery. "You worry too much, bro," he would say, smirking, oblivious to the storm he had created. My parents, too, seemed blind to the truth, praising his initiative and questioning why I was so upset. I felt isolated, angry, and crushed, like my life had become a stage for someone else's performance while I played the background role. Friends tried to console me, but I couldn't explain how deeply personal this betrayal felt, the kind that gnaws at you in the dead of night. I realized that nothing would change unless I took matters into my own hands. That night, I hit rock bottom. I understood that if I didn't act, Ryan would continue to manipulate, lie, and steal with impunity. But acting meant stepping into uncharted territory, exposing him publicly, risking family chaos, and facing the wrath of everyone who had blindly trusted him. My hands shook as I made a silent vow: I would reclaim what was mine, no matter the cost. The thought both terrified and invigorated me, and I knew the first step had to come soon. After hitting rock bottom, I knew I couldn't sit back anymore. The evidence I had collected wasn't just proof, it was a weapon, and I had to use it strategically. I spent nights carefully organizing emails, receipts, and documents, making sure every piece of information clearly showed Ryan's manipulation and lies. I even cross-checked dates and signatures multiple times, because if I was going to expose him, I couldn't afford any mistakes. The house felt silent at night, the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock the only sounds as I planned each step. Every detail mattered: the timing, the audience, the platform. I couldn't just confront him privately and risk him spinning the story. The moral dilemmas gnawed at me, but I knew this wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice and reclaiming what I had rightfully earned. Friends became my sounding board, helping me weigh risks, anticipate fallout, and refine my approach. "You need to be calm, precise, and untouchable," one whispered, peering over my shoulder as I mapped the strategy. I visualized the public reveal, emails sent to family groups, key documents posted in a secure, undeniable way, and timing it so the truth would hit before Ryan could gaslight anyone. Anxiety and adrenaline danced together, making my heart pound as the stakes became painfully clear. And yet, beneath the careful planning, a quiet fear lingered. What if this broke the family? What if I lost my parents' support entirely? Every scenario played in my head, each one worse than the last, but I also felt the tiniest spark of empowerment. I finally had control over the situation. I knew the moment to act was approaching, the tension coiling like a spring ready to snap. The storm was coming, and I had the power to make sure it landed exactly where it needed to. The day finally came, and my hands were shaking as I prepared to release everything. I had double-checked the emails, receipts, and documents one last time, making sure there was no room for Ryan to twist the story. With a deep breath, I sent the evidence to our family group chat, attached a detailed explanation, and shared it with close friends who had been quietly watching the situation unfold. Almost immediately, messages started blowing up my phone. Shock, disbelief, and outrage flooded the chat. Ryan's smug smile was gone, replaced by a pale, frozen expression that made my stomach twist. He opened the chat, trying to scroll past it casually, but everyone's eyes were on him now. There was no escaping the truth. "Wait, this isn't." He stammered, but no one let him finish. Our parents, stunned, scrolled through every document, emails, and proof of the money he had misappropriated. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by gasps and whispered exclamations from relatives. Friends and extended family started messaging me privately, expressing support and disbelief that he could stoop so low. For the first time, I felt a mix of vindication and adrenaline surging through me. I was finally visible, finally heard, and finally in control. Ryan's attempts to explain himself were pathetic, flimsy excuses that only made his betrayal more obvious. The casual arrogance he'd worn for years melted away under the weight of undeniable evidence. And as the messages poured in, I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice, my integrity, and my life from someone who had tried to steal it all. I could see the shock in his eyes, but also the anger, the panic, the desperate need to salvage what was left, and I knew this confrontation was only the beginning. I couldn't sit back and wait for Ryan to try to spin things in his favor. That evening, I confronted him directly, standing in the living room where our parents had gathered, documents in hand. "This ends tonight, Ryan," I said, voice steady but sharp. He tried to smirk, tried to joke, but the proof was undeniable. Every email, every receipt, every forged signature was laid out in front of him, and for the first time, I saw him falter. Our parents looked between us, confusion and hurt written across their faces, but the truth couldn't be ignored. "I trusted you," I said, my chest tight, "and you used that trust to steal from me, and from all of us." Ryan sputtered, words failing him, scrambling for excuses, but the documents spoke louder than anything he could say. Relatives on video calls, friends in private chats, everyone who had supported him silently now witnessed the exposure. The weight of his arrogance collapsed in seconds, and I could feel the tension in the room crack like glass. I felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over me, a mixture of relief, anger, and vindication. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore, it was about setting boundaries, reclaiming respect, and making sure that manipulative behavior didn't go unchecked. Ryan tried one last feeble defense, but I held up the emails, the bank records, and his own words. There was nowhere for him to hide, and the room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for him to crumble completely. In that moment, I realized justice isn't always loud, but when it lands, it hits with a force that can't be ignored. The days after the confrontation were surreal. Family dynamics had shifted overnight, like a mirror cracked in a single, decisive blow. Ryan's arrogance evaporated, replaced by shame and panic, while our parents struggled to process what had really happened. Friends and relatives I hadn't expected to weigh in were messaging me constantly, support, disbelief, even admiration for finally standing up to him. I could see the way people looked at Ryan differently now, their polite smiles replaced by cautious distance and subtle judgment. It was painful in some ways. The brother I had loved and trusted had exposed himself as someone I could no longer rely on. Conversations that once felt light now hung heavy with tension. "I can't believe you did this," my mom whispered one evening, guilt and confusion in her eyes. I didn't argue. I let the proof speak for itself. My parents' complicity, whether intentional or not, had played a part in the betrayal, but there was no denying that I had taken control back. Friends noticed my confidence returning, the quiet, hard-earned pride that comes from reclaiming what's yours after years of being manipulated. Even Ryan's attempts at reconciliation were weak, hollow gestures that I instinctively knew I couldn't accept. The house felt different, almost empty, as though the deceit had left a lingering chill. I spent nights reflecting on the years of frustration, anger, and quiet suffering, realizing how much I had grown through the ordeal. It was still raw, still painful, but there was a new clarity, one that came from knowing that boundaries could be set, that fairness could be demanded, and that I had finally reclaimed my voice. And yet, even as I felt the relief and satisfaction of exposing him, I couldn't shake the knowledge that some consequences were permanent, that the trust and innocence we once shared would never return.